Okay, part 3. Now, there's another way we can look at the difference in time expectation between college and high school. Okay, so let's look at this. In high school, we said already that you have to be in class 180 days. That's assuming you're in class on average of 5 days a week. How many of you went to the 3-day-a-week high school? Any 3-day-a-week high school people here? No? Okay. So, 180 days to learn, 5 days a week, that's 36 weeks of class time to learn. So, here I'm thinking about not just the time in class, but the time outside of class where you have to think about the ideas that are being presented in class. Because we do think about these things as we're going to sleep, or, we've got a certain number of days when we're talking to one of our other classmates about the class. So there is some value to long-term contact with the material as part of learning. In college, we've got a 14-week semester. You may be in class, if it's an English class, only 3 times a week. Some of you only 2. Do any of you have an English class that meets an hour and a half on 2 days? So this is going to be even worse for you because you've only got 2 days a week. So that would be 42 classes to learn the material from the course. Do you notice something odd about those 2 numbers? What about those 2 numbers? Are they just way too close together for comfort? Right? So, what does that mean about one class in a college course? How much material are you learning on that day? About the same amount of material as you learned in a week in the same kind of course in high school. Now, why did I put this in? Right? Every time you have that day, and as a freshman I had them and I learned not to have them anymore. You have that day when that 8 o'clock class comes way too early. And no matter how annoying your alarm is, you just cannot make yourself get out of bed. It is like, did any of you in high school, get the flu and miss a whole week of school? Right? Remember how annoying it was if you missed a whole week of school to try to catch up? Every time you sleep in and say, it's only one day, guess what? That's almost the same amount of material that you have to catch up as when you missed a week of school in high school. Right? You really do not want to miss that valuable time. Because not only are you missing that, you're missing your guidance for the 2 hours. Remember, you're in there trying to figure out how you're going to spend the 2 hours outside of class figuring out what they said in class. So if you miss that class, you have no idea what it is you're supposed to be figuring out afterward. Right? That's a problem. Okay? So, if you're learning that much, if you're learning as much material, right? You're learning the same amount of material in one day as you learned in 1 week in high school. How do you do that? How do you structure that 2 hours of outside time after class? Well, one, immediately. There is a ton of research about the curve of forgetting. Immediately after class, if you knew this much material at the end of class, by the next morning even, you only remember about 40% or less of the material that you heard in class. Your knowledge of the material drops off precipitously for every hour after class. So immediately after class, go back and review what was covered in class. Right? In part to make sure. Remember, if we're going that fast, are you likely to catch everything in class at the time? No, your notes may be incomplete. They may be written in little cryptic abbreviations that you can't quite interpret, right? Well, I'm seeing the looks of recognition here, right? You go back and you try to figure out what those notes were after class. The sooner you do that after class, the more likely you are to accurately translate the chicken scratches that are your notes into something usable later, right? So first, review the material covered in class. Make sure you've got it all down before you get down here where you've forgotten most of what was covered. Okay? If it is a problem-solving type of class, work problems, right? I teach chemistry, so we do problems on a day. Even if you think you understood them while the teacher was talking, make sure that you can work the problems yourself without the teacher's help. Okay? And this is an important one. You have to be honest. You have to go back and do an assessment of your own understanding. Quiz yourself. Do I really understand this? Do I really get this concept? Can I really do this kind of problem? And if you can't, put together questions about the material that you are ready to ask the very next time you go to class. Don't wait. Have those questions ready the very next time you go to class. The next class will start with your questions. Okay? So, by the time you show up to the next class, you should be able to do one of two things. Say, yes, I understand everything possible from the previous class. And if not, you are ready to ask a question about what you do not understand at the very next class. If you do that, you are keeping up with the material. If you let something go to the class after that, you have two consequences. You're not ready to learn what's covered in the next class because anything dependent, if there's something I didn't understand on Monday and I don't ask about it on Wednesday, then anything that needs that on Wednesday, I don't understand either, right? So when I get to Friday in class, what have I got? I got stuff I don't understand from Monday and stuff I don't understand from Wednesday. And if I don't ask it, then there's even more stuff I'm not going to understand on Friday. And that just builds up and gets worse and worse every class. Okay? So, if you've gone through that cycle, anything that goes through two classes, that is, talked about it on Monday. I worked on it Monday night and Tuesday. I just don't get it, right? I still don't understand it. I go back Wednesday, and I'm going to be good. I ask about it. I get an answer on Wednesday. I think about that answer Wednesday night and Thursday. I still don't get it. Now what? Right? Anything you get to that's where you have to be honest in your assessment. If you've gone through two classes and you still don't understand and you've asked the question, then that's where you have to look for outside help before you get snowballed. That's where you look for tutoring sessions in your area. That's when you show up in your faculty member's office in their office hour. Get a longer, more specific explanation. But if you let it go more than two classes, then you are adding to the things that you don't understand, which is going to do nothing but hurt your grade. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, here's the other factor. If a faculty member is really going to go that fast, right? We've been talking about how much faster we have to cover the material in college than you did in high school. How do you survive as a student? Well, it helps if you are ready for that lecture when you're in there. So be prepared for your lecture before that lecture starts. Okay? Now, the first word there is something that often, students will argue about. What's that first word? Read. Yeah, you got to read. Who is it? Does anybody have Dr. Wiseman? Dr. Wiseman on the first day of class puts this. Right? For success in his class, fill in the multi-use adjective of your choice book. Right? So, that's important, but we often get pushback with that because what will students say? They say, if I read, I don't understand it. If I listen to you lecture about it first, and then I go read it, I understand it so much better. How many of you said that? Be honest. Yeah. Okay. As faculty members, what do we hear? What we hear is, the second time I encounter the material, it makes more sense than the first time I encounter the material. Does that make sense? But here's the thing. Which encounter is the more valuable time? In class or out of class? Right? The in-class time, when you've got your instructor there, that's the more valuable time. So that's when you want to have your best understanding. So when you've got the instructor in front of you, do you want that to be the first time you've encountered a new idea or the second time you've encountered a new idea? Right? Aren't you more likely to get more out of that limited lecture time if it's the second time you've encountered the idea? Right? So you can read with a purpose. You don't have to read it to understand everything. You only have to read it to make the in-class contact with the material more valuable. So, one of the big things to focus on is vocabulary. Right? What are the new words that might come up in that lecture that I need to understand so that I can understand that lecture? Right? How many of you have been in a lecture and they've started talking and they're using the jargon of whatever the subject is, whether it be business, whether it be economics, whether it be chemistry or biology or physics, right? And they're using words and you're going, right? You're shaking your head, right? You've been there, right? I have no idea what those words mean, so I have no idea what that sentence means, right? Well, if you could read and just get the words down, then that sentence is more likely to make sense, which is going to make the understanding part of the lecture afterward easier, right? So one of the things you look for is vocabulary. And if it is a subject that uses problems, like chemistry, you can try to work some of the problems or work through the example problems so that at least you know what kinds of problems are going to come up. So again, you're prepared, you know where you don't understand them, you know where you had a problem with that, and so you are more likely to understand that at the time it is presented. That's the advantage of reading ahead. It's not that you're going to understand every word of a college-level textbook. I'll be honest. The first time I get a new textbook and I read a passage, I don't get it all. Right? But you get enough so that the second time you encounter it in class, you're ready to get more out of that second encounter in that valuable class time. Okay? Now, another thing that can help you is create lecture notes before lecture even starts. As you're going through and doing that reading, go ahead and jot down some notes. Figure out what the important ideas are, right? What did we talk about? We talked about vocabulary. So you can write down vocabulary and the definitions that go with those, right? Go ahead and get that in your notebook. And so a lot of the time when the instructor is talking, instead of having to write down every word, you can go, oh yeah, I got that. Yeah, he said that was important. I already wrote that down, right? She used that word. I already wrote that down. That gives you more time to process the ideas you're hearing, and with less time spent writing over whatever they're saying. Right? So, then all you have to do is sort of add fine points and examples. Fill in the gaps. What examples did the instructor use? In what context did they use the vocabulary word that I wrote down? Those are things then that make your note-taking in class easier because you were prepared for that before you went to class. There's a note-taking style where you divide your paper in two and you write down stuff from your reading on one side, and then you have half the paper to go down and say, oh, okay, they talked about that. Oh, yeah, they talked about that. Right? And you can just sort of fill in on the other side the specifics as you go through. Okay. Now, once you get to lecture, how do you survive at that pace? Well, one, this is one I'm always surprised I have to say, but we get back to this. Well, what did I say in the other one? We have to, as a student, you have to stay awake and pay attention. Yeah. Now, because our time is limited, there's something that is 99% true of college faculty members. If we talk about it, it's important, right? That's mostly our message. I think this is really important, and it's important enough to talk about, so it's probably important enough for you to learn. You should never... What question annoys college faculty members more than any? Right? Oh, we hate to hear that. Because we think, partly it's ego, right? Remember, we're experts in something. But we think everything we say is important. So for someone to even ask whether it's important enough to do because it's going to be on a test, it just insults us, right? So, and it's a pointless question because what is our answer always going to be? Yes, right? And even if it wasn't going to be, because someone asked, what does the answer become? Yes, it is going to be on the test, right? And the other thing is, if we're talking, you should be writing. So you have to learn to write quickly. I have a student in class now that I'm going to have to talk with because he has real trouble writing. And I think long term, it's really going to affect his success because I can see that he's having trouble writing in a way that he can keep up. I got 3 slides. Let me see what's there. Okay? I think we better stop.